Once upon a moonlit evening in the small town of Ravenscroft, a quaint thrift store nestled between weathered buildings held an artifact that would unleash an uncanny series of events upon the unsuspecting soul who dared to purchase it. The store, known by locals as Trinkets and Treasures, boasted an eclectic assortment of items ranging from vintage vinyl records to tattered books with stories long forgotten. Among the dusty shelves and dimly lit corners, a peculiar antique dollhouse sat unnoticed, waiting for its next owner. The dollhouse was a replica of an elegant Victorian mansion, its wooden facade adorned with intricate carvings and delicate details. Miniature curtains hung in the windows, and tiny shingles covered the roof, giving it an aura of authenticity that made it both charming and eerie. Evelyn Tate, an unassuming woman with a penchant for the peculiar, wandered into the thrift store on a brisk autumn afternoon. Drawn by an unseen force, her eyes locked onto the dollhouse displayed on a forgotten shelf in the corner. The moment her gaze met the miniature mansion, a shiver crawled down her spine, and a sense of curiosity overwhelmed her. Without a second thought, Evelyn purchased the dollhouse and brought it home to her modest cottage on the outskirts of Ravenscroft. Little did she know that this seemingly innocent acquisition would unravel the fabric of her reality in ways she could never have fathomed. Upon placing the dollhouse on a small table in her living room, Evelyn noticed something peculiar. The interior of the dollhouse replicated the exact layout of her cottage. Every piece of furniture, every wall, and every decoration mirrored her own home. It was as if the dollhouse held a tiny, supernatural blueprint of her life. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, Evelyn decided to rearrange the miniature furniture within the dollhouse, half expecting some kind of mystical occurrence. As she moved the tiny chairs, beds, and tables, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was tampering with forces beyond her understanding. The next morning, Evelyn awoke to an unsettling revelation. The living room furniture in her actual home had shifted overnight, now perfectly matching the new arrangement she had crafted within the dollhouse. Confused and alarmed, she chalked it up to a vivid dream or a lapse in memory, dismissing the eerie coincidence as mere happenstance. Days passed, and Evelyn continued to experiment with the dollhouse, rearranging the pieces in various configurations. Each time she altered the miniature world, the changes seamlessly transferred to her own living space. It was as if the dollhouse possessed a malevolent sentience, anticipating her every move. As Evelyn's fascination transformed into trepidation, she reached out to a local historian, Mr. Archibald Blackwood, renowned for his knowledge of Ravenscroft's enigmatic past. Intrigued by Evelyn's story, Mr. Blackwood delved into the town's archives, seeking clues to the origin of the mysterious dollhouse. His research uncovered a dark tale from the 19th century involving a reclusive toymaker named Nathaniel Thorne. Legend had it that Thorne, driven by a morbid fascination with the supernatural, had crafted the dollhouse using wood from an ancient and malevolent tree. The tree, known as the Whispering Willow, was said to possess the ability to absorb the essence of the living, imprinting their homes and lives onto the dollhouse. The toymaker had vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind a legacy that had long faded into local folklore. It seemed that Evelyn had unwittingly stumbled upon a relic of Ravenscroft's haunted history. Disturbed by the revelations, Evelyn considered destroying the dollhouse, but an inexplicable force compelled her to keep it intact. She couldn't escape the feeling that the miniature mansion held a sinister influence, tethering her fate to its whims. One fateful evening, as a storm raged outside, Evelyn sat alone in her dimly lit living room, watching the shadows dance across the walls. The dollhouse stood ominously on the table, its miniature windows reflecting the flashes of lightning. As she stared at the tiny replica of her home, Evelyn noticed something chilling. Miniature versions of herself and Mr. Blackwood appeared within the dollhouse, mirroring their positions in the room. Their tiny, lifeless eyes seemed to gaze back at her, conveying an unsettling awareness that transcended the boundaries between the miniature world and reality. In a panic, Evelyn reached for her phone to call Mr. Blackwood, but the line remained silent. The storm outside intensified, and a haunting melody filled the air, echoing through the cottage. The same melody that played within the dollhouse whenever Evelyn rearranged its furniture. Terrified, Evelyn stumbled backward, only to find herself surrounded by an ethereal fog that materialized within her living room. Whispers, indistinct and chilling, emanated from the fog, speaking of forgotten sins and impending doom. In the heart of the fog, the dollhouse flickered with an otherworldly glow, its miniature inhabitants coming to life with a sinister animation. The tiny replicas of Evelyn and Mr. Blackwood moved with an unnatural grace, their lifeless eyes fixated on the trembling woman. In a moment of pure horror, Evelyn realized that the dollhouse had become a gateway, bridging the gap between the physical world and a malevolent realm fueled by the absorbed essence of the living. The toymaker's creation had transcended its origins, becoming a vessel for the supernatural forces that had long lain dormant. As the whispers intensified, Evelyn frantically searched for a way to sever the connection between herself and the dollhouse. In her desperation, she recalled the ancient tree, the whispering willow, and a surge of realization coursed through her veins. With trembling hands, Evelyn gathered her courage and approached the dollhouse. She whispered words of defiance, demanding the release of her soul from its miniature clutches. The fog recoiled momentarily, as if acknowledging her plea. Seizing the opportunity, Evelyn recited an incantation she had discovered in her research, invoking the name of Nathaniel Thorne and beseeching the spirits to break the unholy bond between the living and the miniature mansion. The room quivered as the storm outside raged on, and a sudden, bone-chilling silence enveloped the cottage. The fog dissipated, the whispers ceased, and the dollhouse stood silent and still on the table. Evelyn collapsed, exhausted but victorious. The connection had been severed, and the malevolent forces that had plagued her were banished. The storm outside began to subside, and a newfound tranquility settled over Ravenscroft. In the aftermath, Evelyn chose to bury the dollhouse in the garden, marking the spot with protective charms and symbols to ensure it would never again disrupt the lives of the living. She confided in Mr. Blackwood, who, though shaken by the events, expressed gratitude for her bravery in breaking the curse that had lingered for centuries. As the years passed, the tale of Evelyn and the living dollhouse became a cautionary legend in Ravenscroft. Locals whispered about the haunted cottage and the courageous woman who had faced the supernatural forces that lurked within the miniature mansion. The small town returned to its quiet existence, but those who knew the story couldn't help but cast wary glances toward the garden where the whispering willow's malevolent presence lay dormant, sealed away by the bravery of one woman who had confronted the supernatural and emerged victorious.